Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into the weeds, unpacking the core ideas from the foundations of Angel Wing, volume #1.
That's right. Our mission is to explore what's presented there about self-mastery, about consciousness, and this term they use quite a bit, biopsychospiritual evolution.
It sounds complex, and honestly, it is. We're looking at a path from just basic self-awareness, which frankly can be pretty confused sometimes,
Oh, absolutely.
all the way to what the authors describe as, well, a much higher level of consciousness, of self-mastery. It's not just self-help tips, is it?
No, not at all. This is framed as a kind of complete metamorphosis, a blueprint,
Yeah.
really, for transformation, following the path they lay out to unleash potentials they argue are already inside everyone.
Okay, before we dive headfirst into all that, it's really important we acknowledge the people behind this work. This technical research book didn't just appear out of thin air.
Definitely not. A huge amount of effort went into it.
So we really want to extend our thanks to Dr. Chaitanya Kripalu, who is the founder and CEO of the Angel Wing LLC. Also, Dr. Elizabeth Berman, she's a member of their mastermind group and a dedicated presenter for Angel Wing.
Yes.
And critically, Sachin Karnik. He's the researcher who did all the background heavy lifting, the research for this volume, #1 book.
Their work makes this conversation possible. We're essentially exploring the map they've provided.
Exactly. So let's start exploring. You mentioned the core mission of the Angel Wing LLC. It sounds incredibly ambitious.
It is facilitating that shift, from just knowing you exist to really mastering how you exist. And the aim isn't just individual betterment. It's, well, they state it as uplifting humanity.
Wow. Okay. And they approach this through what you called a holistic structure.
Yes, that's key. A holistic approach. It's about interconnecting all the different parts of their programs to generate a really profound state of well-being. They argue you can't achieve this kind of deep change by working on just one piece in isolation.
Right, like just focusing on physical health but ignoring your mental patterns, or maybe meditating but not addressing, say, unresolved trauma.
Precisely. It leads to incomplete results, keeps people stuck. The material uses this central analogy, which I think is quite effective.
Which is?
The bird needing both wings to fly. You need all the components, the physical, the mental, the emotional, the spiritual aspects functioning together in harmony, if you really want to soar, to reach great heights.
Makes sense. If one wing is injured or just flapping out of sync.
Then the bird is grounded or its flight is really limited. That imbalance, that lack of harmony is essentially what they identify as the block to achieving this deep well-being and potential.
So that holistic view isn't just a nice idea, it's structurally essential to their whole program, addressing the biological, the psychological, and that spiritual dimension all at once. It's all connected.
It's an interconnected web, exactly. Trying to fly with just one wing. That's where they suggest many people find themselves trapped in cycles of suffering or limitation without quite knowing why.
Okay, so this deep dive is about understanding how to get both wings working together, basically.
In essence, yes. Restoring that equilibrium based on the foundations laid out in the book.
All right, so with that holistic foundation set, let's unpack their main goal. Guiding society towards sustainable progress and prosperity, and they propose doing this by helping individuals unleash inherent healing and energetic potentials.
Yes, and that brings us right to the core concept, the term you mentioned earlier, biopsychospiritual evolution.
Right. Let's define that carefully. What do they mean by evolution here? It sounds quite grand.
It's meant to be. The text is very clear. This isn't just about small improvements or tweaks. It's presented as a profound metamorphosis.
Like the caterpillar to a butterfly example they use.
Exactly that metaphor. It signifies a change that's not just psychological, not just about changing your thoughts, but something deeper involving a restructuring.
Okay, so break down the biopsychospiritual parts. What does the bio piece mean beyond just, feeling healthier?
Good question. The biological component suggests that this fundamental shift in consciousness and mindset achieving that inner harmony we talked about doesn't just stay in the mind. It actually manifests physically.
How so?
It connects to unleashing those inherent healing potentials. The idea is that the body is constantly adapting, and when you achieve a state of deep integrated self-mastery, the body responds. It can lead to physiological changes, a kind of physical restructuring that supports higher energy levels, greater resilience.
So it's a claim that deep psychological coherence can have measurable physical effects beyond just stress reduction.
That's the assertion, yes. increased energetic potential, enhanced healing capacity. It's the physical reflection of the inner shift.
And the psycho part, that seems more straightforward, maybe.
The psychological shift is that change in mindset, letting go of limiting beliefs, conditioned patterns, old wounds. And that letting go is what allows for the manifestation of these innate abilities, the butterfly's wings, to stick with the metaphor.
Okay, so bio is the physical response, psycho is the mental emotional shift. How do they structure actually doing this? You mentioned the mind-body, mind-brain link is important.
Critically important.
Oh,
They aren't treating the mind like some abstract thing disconnected from our biology.
right.
The framework has two main components working together.
Right.
First, there's the psychological component.
Yeah.
This involves, comprehensive methods to really work with the mental and emotional landscape, addressing past conditioning, current thought habits, emotional blocks, kind of like clearing the internal slate.
Therapy-oriented, perhaps?
Right.
Or self-reflection tools?
It seems to encompass tools for that kind of deep internal work, yes. But then there's the second piece, which is distinct,
Which is?
the psychoeducational aspect.
Yeah.
And this is really key. It's not just about feeling different. It's about understanding the mechanics of why you feel and think the way you do.
So it's like getting the user manual for your own mind.
That's a great way to put it. It complements the understanding of physical and mental physiology. It empowers you to grasp the relationship between your thoughts and your actual brain function, things like neural pathways, plasticity.
So you learn how your thinking patterns actually shape your brain's activity.
Exactly. And the belief is that this deeper, almost scientific understanding of yourself helps foster creativity and actually speeds up this individual evolution. You're learning to consciously navigate your own mind-body system.
Instead of being driven by unconscious habits.
Precisely. Moving from being reactive to being consciously responsive, you could say.
And the text points out that this focus on deeper realization, connecting to a higher state. This isn't a totally new idea, right? It echoes things found in many traditions.
Yes, they situate it within that larger context. Spiritual traditions, religious paths, meditative practices across millennia have aimed at something similar. It's not presented as inventing truth, but maybe offering a modern, structured, psychoeducational pathway towards a truth that's long been recognized.
So the goal is enhancing well-being, enhancing wellness as a foundation for that progress towards higher consciousness. It's about lasting change, not quick fixes.
Sustainable progress, that seems to be the emphasis.
Okay, this is where it starts to get really fundamental, moving from the how of the framework to the what, the philosophical core. The book puts a single question right at the heart of everything. Who am I?
And they stress this isn't just, a philosophical musing. It's presented as the central inquiry of human life. Get this wrong or remain unclear. And everything else, knowledge, striving, goals, it's all built on shaky ground.
If you don't know who the I is that's doing the knowing or the striving.
Then what exactly are you knowing or striving for? It becomes misdirected.
So to explore this, the research contrasts two major historical viewpoints on the self. Let's start with the ancient Eastern one, the Vedantic tradition.
Right. In Vedanta, the true self, and they often use a capital S for this, is called Atman. It's described not as a consciousness, but as pure consciousness itself.
Pure consciousness. What does that mean practically?
It means it's inherently eternal, it's unchanging, it's unconditioned by anything external. It's completely distinct from all the things that do change the body. Ages, thoughts, race, emotions come and go. The Atman is like the silent, ever-present witness to all of that.
The witness. Okay, and this leads to that famous declaration from the Upanishads.
Tat tivam asi.
Which means?
That thou art, or you are that. It's incredibly profound. It means the essence of you, the individual Atman, is not actually separate from the ultimate reality of the universe, often called Brahman.
So my deepest self isn't just me, it's connected to everything.
It is everything in that view. The self is infinite, undivided, eternal, no fundamental separation.
Wow. Okay, that is worlds apart from the view that really shaped a lot of Western thinking, especially post-Descartes.
Radically different, yes. The Cartesian approach, famously summed up as cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am.
Right. Locating the self in the act of thinking.
Descartes was looking for certainty, a foundation for knowledge, and he found it in the undeniable reality of his own thought process. But, the text argues, this had the effect of confining the self primarily to the mental realm.
Identifying self with thought. And what's the problem with that, according to this material?
Well, think about it. Thoughts are constantly changing. They can be chaotic. They cease in deep sleep. They can diminish. If your very I-amness is tied only to thinking, then the self becomes inherently unstable, contingent on this fluctuating mental activity.
Okay, I see the contrast. One sees the self as unchanging awareness, the other identifies it with changing thoughts.
And this contrast leads us directly to what the angel wing framework presents as perhaps the most crucial technical distinction needed for self-mastery.
Which is?
The difference between the capital S self and the lowercase s self concept. Getting this distinction clear is presented as the absolute key, the real beginning of self-knowledge.
All right, let's define these very carefully then, as the text does. The self with the capital S.
The self is the ultimate subject. It's that pure, unconditioned awareness we talked about from Vedanta. It's the ground of being. Think of it like the space in which everything happens, or the screen on which the movie of your life plays.
The witness again?
Exactly. The silent witness observing all phenomena, thoughts, feelings, sensations, the world outside. And crucially, the text emphasizes this self cannot be made into an object.
What does that mean? It can't be objectified.
You can observe your hand.
Right.
You can observe a thought or notice a feeling. Those are objects of your awareness. But the awareness itself, the observer doing the observing, you can't step outside of it to look at it because it's the very field in which all looking takes place. It's the ultimate subject.
Okay, so that's the self, then the lowercase self concept. That must be the object.
Entirely the object, yes. The self-concept is described as a psychological construct. It's the story of me.
The narrative.
Yes, a dynamic, evolving narrative built from memories, roles, parent, child, employee, friend attributes we identify with, our relationships, our cultural conditioning, all the feedback we get. It's your identity tag. Name, job, history, personality traits.
And the text says this self-concept is inherently limited. Why?
Because it depends entirely on external reference points and boundaries. It needs comparison, validation, context. I am this because I am not that. It's defined by what it relates to, what it possesses, what it does. It relies on memory.
So it's inherently changeable and defined by external factors.
Completely. The self, capital S, is presented as infinite and unchanging. The self-concept, small s, is finite and always in flux. Understanding this difference, distinguishing the eternal subject from the transient, constructed object that's presented as the watershed moment. Until you see that difference, you mistake the story for the storyteller.
And remain trapped in the limitations of the story. Okay, so if the self-concept is this constructed narrative, how does it become so powerful that we mistake it for who we truly are? The text says it starts really early in life.
It does. In infancy, the process of differentiation begins. The baby starts to distinguish me from not me, from the mother, from the environment. Boundaries form.
The first sense of a separate self.
Right. And then, through interactions, especially with parents mirroring feedback and later, through social interactions, culture, education, layers get added to this initial sense of me.
Like, you're a good girl, you're clumsy, you're smart, you belong to this family nation.
All of that. It constructs the story, the identity. And this story is maintained primarily through memory, recalling past experiences that reinforce the narrative, and through constant repetition, both internal self-talk and external validation.
So this memory-based story becomes our default operating system. And the big mistake, the sort of existential slip-up the text talks about, is the fall into identification.
That's the term they use, yes. And it's described as this critical moment, maybe not a single moment, but a gradual process, where consciousness, which in its pure state is just that open, aware self, gets completely absorbed or entangled in the contents of its experience. Meaning it forgets its own nature as the spacious awareness in which thoughts, feelings, and sensations appear. It starts to believe it is those thoughts, feelings, and sensations.
So instead of being the vast, silent sky, consciousness identifies with the passing clouds.
That's a perfect analogy. The awareness that is aware gets fused with what it's aware of. So if a strong feeling like anger arises, the identified person doesn't just observe anger as present, they say and believe, I am angry. The feeling becomes a definition of self in that moment.
Okay. And this fundamental confusion, this identification with the contents, this gives rise to what we commonly call the ego. Let's define that based on how the angel wing material uses the term.
Right, because ego gets used in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
In this framework, the ego is understood as the functional sense of I that arises from this misidentification. It's the localized self that claims ownership over experience.
Ownership.
Yes. The I who says, I think, I feel, I want, I did this. It's the operating system that navigates the world, makes decisions, takes action, relates to others based on that constructed self-concept.
So it's necessary for functioning in the world? It's not just inherently bad.
Exactly. The text presents it as a necessary instrument for navigating three-dimensional reality. The problem isn't the ego's existence, but when it's mistaken for the totality of who you are, when you believe the ego is the self.
That's when it becomes a source of problems, limitation, suffering.
Yes, because the ego operates fundamentally through separation, comparison, and maintaining its boundaries. When it's running the show, believing it is the whole show, it generates limitation and conflict.
So what are the hallmarks of operating from this space, from what the text might call the false self, this self-concept driven by this misidentified ego? How would someone recognize that in themselves?
The false self, according to the material, has some key operating principles. One is comparison. It constantly needs to measure itself against others to know where it stands, to feel valuable or deficient.
Am I better than, worse than, richer than, smarter than?
Exactly that. Another is validation. It craves external recognition, approval, acknowledgement to feel real and secure. Its sense of worth is outsourced.
Makes sense. And the third?
Differentiation. It solidifies its identity by emphasizing opposition. I am this because I am not that. I am successful because I am not a failure. It needs contrast, even conflict sometimes, to feel its boundaries, to feel itself as separate.
So its security is based on things that are inherently unstable external opinions, comparisons, being not something else.
Precisely. If the external validation disappears, you lose the job, the relationship ends, the status changes. The ego feels threatened, like it's dissolving, which causes immense anxiety and suffering.
That instability. Yeah, you can see how that drives a lot of human behavior. And this connects to what the text calls the modern tragedy.
It does. They describe this modern paradigm where we're heavily conditioned, culturally and economically, to equate our existence with our function, with our productivity.
Your worth is what you do, what you produce, what you achieve.
Yes, your inherent value as a being gets overshadowed by your performance, your status, your job title, your accomplishments, the image you project, that they call the mask.
You see it everywhere. People introduce themselves by their job first thing. That
Yep.
is their identity in that context.
And the tragedy, as the book frames it, is that in this relentless effort to become somebody to build and maintain this impressive performing self-concept, we forget the profound simplicity and sufficiency of just being.
The focus on doing obscures the reality of being.
Exactly. The constant effort to perform the role, to maintain the mask, consumes the very awareness that could otherwise recognize the true self. And this misidentification, this trap of the false self, is what keeps individuals locked into limitations, unable to access those higher potentials the framework talks about. #VV, hindrances to true self-discovery and the path to mastery.
Okay, so the framework diagnoses the problem, this trap of the ego, the false self, the misidentification. But then it pivots to the solution, the path toward self-mastery. The text raises four really crucial diagnostic questions about the hindrances we face. Let's go through them.
These questions are designed to bring awareness to the common sticking points. Yeah. The first one challenges that core error we just discussed, identity construction. It asks, are we defined solely by our name, job, location, relationships, or is there something else?
It forces you to confront the limitations of those labels. If you lose your job, are you suddenly nobody? If your relationships change, does your core being vanish?
Right. The framework points towards that something else being the unconditioned presence, the self. It's not about getting rid of roles you need them to function,
Yeah.
but about realizing they aren't the ultimate definition of who you are. It's about non-attachment to them as identity.
Okay. The second question digs into external definitions. What specifically hinders our self-awareness? What keeps us from seeing clearly?
The answer provided in the research is very direct. It's the erroneous identifications we form based on past experiences.
Meaning we believe our past defines us now.
Exactly. Especially difficult or traumatic past experiences. We get stuck believing that what happened to us is us. The memory of the event and the identity constructed around it, I am a victim, I am a failure, I am unworthy because of X, becomes the lens through which we see the present.
So that failure 5 years ago isn't just something that happened. The ego incorporates it into the current identity. I am the person who fails.
Precisely. The framework aims to sever that identification, asserting you are the awareness in which the failure occurred, not the failure itself.
Powerful distinction. Okay, the third question shifts towards action. Once we recognize these hindrances, how do we actually move beyond them? What's required?
This is where personal responsibility comes in very strongly in the text. It states, it is the sole duty of the individual to actively cultivate and maintain inner stability.
Sole duty. That sounds quite demanding.
It emphasizes agency. It's about continually anchoring oneself in a state of inner steadiness, regardless of external fluctuations. It's not about waiting for the world to change or for someone else to fix you. It's an ongoing internal practice.
So self-mastery isn't a destination you arrive at, but more like a continuous process of stabilization, of anchoring.
That seems to be the implication, an active moment-to-moment commitment. And that leads into the fourth question, which addresses a very common struggle in this kind of work, the struggle to let go, particularly around healing. Why is it often so hard to release pain, discomfort, or negative patterns?
This answer in the text really struck me.
It's quite profound. The difficulty arises, they argue, from a core, often unconscious belief. The belief that certain negative events in our past should not have happened.
The resistance to reality itself.
Exactly. The ego, which wants control and operates based on its preferred narratives, essentially argues with history. It maintains a state of resistance to what was. And it's this active resistance, this internal argument with reality that perpetuates suffering in the present moment.
So the pain isn't just from the memory of the event, but from the ongoing rejection of the fact that it occurred.
That's the core insight presented. The resistance is the suffering in many ways.
Okay, so if that's the diagnosis of the hindrances, how does the framework propose we actually overcome them? How do we achieve this mastery, which you said isn't about controlling thoughts, but recognizing the observer?
The practical path centers on rigorous observation. And the key tool or process for this is called viveka.
Viveka, that's a Sanskrit term.
Yes, meaning discernment. It's presented as the crucial intellectual and experiential skill to cultivate.
Discernment
Between the observer, the self, and the observed. Thoughts, emotions, sensations, the self-concept. It's the ability to clearly distinguish the subject from the object in your own experience.
How does one practice viveka? What does it look like?
It involves cultivating the capacity to simply witness whatever arises in your field of awareness, a thought, an emotion, a bodily sensation, without immediately reacting, judging, or identifying with it.
So instead of getting swept away by a wave of anxiety,
You learn to stand back internally and just note, a pattern of anxious thought and feeling is arising right now. You observe its texture, its intensity, how it eventually changes or fades without becoming it.
that sounds simple, but incredibly difficult in practice. Our habit is to jump right into the middle of every thought and feeling.
It absolutely requires training and consistency. The whole habit of mind is to identify. So the practice of viveka is consciously developing the opposite habit, the habit of disidentification, separating the I who is aware from the thought feeling that is being witnessed.
And what happens through sustained practice of this observation, this discernment?
The gradual insight, which the text suggests becomes self-evident over time, is this. Everything that can be observed cannot be the observer.
That's the key pivot.
Yes. If I can see the thought, I cannot be the thought. If I can feel the emotion, I cannot be the emotion. If I'm aware of the body sensation, I cannot be the sensation. Since these things are known, perceived, they cannot be the ultimate knower, the perceiver,
So this process naturally turns attention away from the contents.
and inward, toward the source of the attention itself, toward that which is doing the observing but cannot itself be observed as an object, that silent background consciousness, the Itman.
And stabilizing in that awareness, what does that achieve?
When this witnessing awareness becomes stable, when it's your default mode rather than identification, it becomes the seat of inner freedom. The true self, this awareness, doesn't get hooked by desires or pushed away by fears in the same way the ego does.
It just observes them arise and fall?
It observes without attachment. It sees attraction and aversion appear within the field of consciousness, but it remains the untouched field itself. This recognition, this stabilization as the witness, is presented as the foundation for transcending the ego's limitations and achieving genuine self-mastery.
So connecting this back to the big picture,
Yeah.
biopsychospiritual evolution, this whole journey is really about moving from that fragmented state of the self-concept
Where you're a collection of roles, memories, conflicts.
towards a state of wholeness, of unity, by identifying with the underlying awareness.
Precisely. Identity expands. The separation dissolves. That truth of tat tamamasi, that you are fundamentally connected to the whole, stops being just an intellectual concept and starts becoming a lived reality. And that, according to the framework, is what unlocks the potential for sustainable progress, healing, and prosperity. #TagShix, conclusion and provocative thought.
Wow. We've covered a lot of ground here, really delving into the structure and philosophy within the foundations of Angel Wing Volume #1. Let's try to summarize the absolute core takeaways for someone listening.
Okay. We started with the biopsychospiritual mandate, this idea of a complete metamorphosis, not just incremental change, driven by a holistic approach that integrates mind, body, and spirit.
Right, the two wings of the bird needing to work together.
Then we hit the absolutely critical distinction between the true self-capitalized S, the pure, unchanging awareness, the subject, and the self-concept lowercase s, the constructed, transient psychological story, the object.
Understanding that difference is key. We saw how confusing the two leads to identification with the ego, the limited sense of I that claims ownership and operates through comparison and validation.
Which fuels the modern tragedy of equating our worth with performance and forgetting the simplicity of just being.
And then the path forward, overcoming hindrances like erroneous identification with the past and taking responsibility for inner stability.
Through the practice of viveka discernment, learning to observe thoughts and feelings without becoming them, recognizing that anything observable isn't the ultimate observer.
Stabilizing as that witnessing awareness is the route to inner freedom and mastery.
That's the essence of it.
So for you listening, what does all this mean practically? I think the core message here is that the constant striving to achieve an identity through status, accomplishments, proving yourself, might be fundamentally missing the point.
The text strongly suggests true identity isn't something you build or earn externally.
It's something already present, to be recognized internally. Through that quiet observation, that inquiry, the path to the self, in a way, is the self simply becoming aware of itself.
Beautifully put. And that leads us back to that powerful point about healing and suffering. We talk about how the struggle often comes from that deep-seated belief that painful past events should not have happened.
That resistance to what was.
Right. Now, consider this. If the true self, that witnessing awareness, is inherently unchanging, untouched by the content of experience, truly beyond the personal narrative, what happens if you apply that steady, non-reactive awareness directly to this belief, the belief that reality should have been different?
Apply the witnessing awareness to the should not have happened thought itself.
Yes. If the self is the space in which all phenomena appear, including painful memories and resistant thoughts, does true freedom, ultimate healing, perhaps lie not in trying to change the unchangeable past or even necessarily processing the narrative endlessly, but in dissolving the resistance itself? In dissolving the should by seeing it simply as another thought arising in awareness, rather than engaging with it as an absolute truth.
So liberation through acceptance of what is and what was, grounded in the recognition of the unchanging self.
Could it be that simple, yet that profound? Does stability lie in releasing the argument with reality? That's something to really sit with, to explore in your own experience, building on everything we've unpacked today. A final thought to ponder on your own path of self-discovery.